If I turn off my microphone right now and I start talking, does it show up on the live stream?
Hello. Hello.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, hello, good evening, all of you watching on YouTube in Texas, around the country, and all over the world. Welcome to the Libertarian Party of Texas Presidential Debate Forum. My name is Timothy Martinez, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. Bienvenidos a todos. I'm standing here in Selma, Texas, in a large, vacant, empty hall. Perhaps a hall like this where our convention itself might have taken place, a large stage with 7 dioceses, candidates chiming in, a lively room of delegates eagerly listening for the words of delineation and distinction so they can decide who their candidate and nominee will be. But alas, we all know it was not going to happen. It was not meant to be. But we have been nimble. We have made choices that have moved us into the digital space. And here we are, and you're here with us, and we have to continue to be nimble as a party. In just a few short days, we will select our nominee for President of the United States on that ticket of the Libertarian Party, so that in November, we can cast our ballot for our preferred principles. And folks, that is what has guided us all through our lifespan as a party. Since the 70s, we have navigated by the light of individual liberty and prosperity. We have always and we will continue to navigate by that North Star. And so I compel you, those watching today, as we make these decisions, as our leaders have to be nimble and daring and take risks, I implore you, never lose sight of the principles of liberty. But you didn't tune in to hear me blather on a soapbox tonight, did you? No, you came for one reason and one reason alone, so you could do your part, so you could hear from these candidates and decide for yourself who you will vote for in a few days. We will have a poll shortly following the debate, and we'll get into that. But first, I have my obligation to you to introduce to you your moderator for tonight's debate, a friend of mine, a friend of yours, somebody who is leading the way in that principle of liberty, my friend and yours, Whitney Bilyeu. Whitney, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you, Tim. Good evening, candidates and viewers. We are going to go ahead and get started this evening with introductions, and each of you are going to have 2 minutes to present yourselves to the audience. We are going to start with Adam Kokesh.
All right. Thank you so much, Whitney, and for the Libertarian Party of Texas for persevering, and for everybody who is joining us online tonight in the midst of Corona season. I very much appreciate you taking the time for all of us and for the party and for the cause of freedom. I am running for the Libertarian Party nomination for president because I am tired of this crap. I'm tired of veteran suicides. I'm tired of seeing poor men get poorer and dying in war to line rich men's pockets. I'm tired of the rich getting richer while the rest of us suffer. I'm tired of our heritage, our birthright, our freedom being stolen from us every single day by an out-of-control government. The difference between the Republicans and Democrats is like the difference between going off a cliff at 70 miles an hour or 80 miles an hour. We are the ones who have the answer to this dilemma as libertarians, to take this country in a whole new direction. And it doesn't do us any good to say, hey, we can take us off the cliff at only 10 miles an hour. We need to offer the American people something fundamentally different. I'm running on the platform of localization. a process that would leave us, after the first step, with 50 independent states and up to 562 sovereign native nations on the way to voluntary government at the community level. That's our goal, right? A world set free in our lifetimes. Let's give the American people what they want and win. If not voting was counted as a vote for nobody in 2016, the Electoral College results would have been Clinton 72, Trump 21, and nobody, in an epic landslide of historic proportions, 445 votes. These are ideas that work. These are ideas that win. This is why we've had such an amazing, successful campaign. And I look forward to the rest of the opportunity tonight to tell you how localization can take the Libertarian Party to the next level.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Daniel Berman.
Hi, I'm Dan Taxationist Theft Berman, and of course, you might have heard me say, I've come to cut tax and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum. So I'm here tonight running for president of the United States. I'm right here, right now in Mexico. Why? Because this is a libertarian position, isn't it? Should we really give that much respect in regard to imaginary borders, imaginary lines between countries and how it restricts our freedom? So something that we're actually here that I'm actually happy to talk about tonight is some of our differences with other candidates. We've had a lot of debates where we've basically been in agreement with each other. And that's no good because that doesn't really help us decide who we're going to set forth as the libertarian figurehead to represent this party on the national stage. We need to air our grievances with those differences before we choose somebody, or else we might choose the wrong person. I want to talk about the New American Dream tonight, and this is a plan that I have that is going to erase Americans' debt. Right now, 87% of Americans are in debt. Everybody's feeling it. Everyone's being taxed. And of course, right now with this Corona thing going on, a lot of people are feeling the real impact of not having their month-to-month paycheck. I have a plan that's going to fix all of this, and this will solve problems for every single American. And this is what the Libertarian Party has been missing, and this is what the Libertarian Party needs to win. I'm here to bring that to you.
All right, to Jacob Hornberger.
It's great to be here back in the great state of Texas, virtually. I grew up in Laredo on a farm on the Rio Grande where I learned how to bale hay and sell hay. And then I went off to college at Virginia Military Institute where I got a BA in economics, returned home to Austin where I attended law school at UT, dropped out for a semester to attend infantry school at Fort Benning, then went to Dallas to get some money to pay for the rest of my law school, waiting tables at the Glory Hole Mine Company there in Dallas. And then after law school, returned home to practice law in partnership with my dad, and made my biggest financial error up to that point. Bought my first car, a brand new Corvette Stingray, which put me in deep debt with monthly payments. And so I was destitute. So I moved into a mobile home and lived in a mobile home park for a couple of years. But it was okay because my real life hero was a television lawyer named Tony Petrocelli, who lived in a mobile home. And I thought, well, if it's good enough for Petrocelli, it's good enough for me. The very first trial I had was in federal district court right after I got out of law school. The federal judge appointed me to represent an indigent client on a cocaine conspiracy case where he was facing 15 years. And he was claiming he was innocent. And I went up against about 15 DEA agents and one of the best criminal prosecutors in the state. And I won. I got an acquittal for an innocent man, and I knew he was innocent. And it was really a gratifying feeling. And then when I was 28, I walked into the Laredo Public Library. I discovered 4 little books that gave the principle, the no compromise, pure case for libertarianism. And it was the discovery of those little 4 books that had been published by the Foundation for Economic Education 20 years before that ended up changing the course of my life.
Thank you. Joe Jorgensen.
Hi, I'm Dr. Joe Jorgensen, and I'm running for president because government is too big, too bossy, too nosy, and usually hurts the very people they claim they're going to help. I'm a senior lecturer at Clemson University, and many of you might remember me as Harry Brown's 1996 running mate, and I've been involved with the Libertarian Party since 1979. So I'd like to thank the Texas Party for having me on. I also have Texas roots. I received my Bachelor of Science from Baylor University, went on to get my Master of Business Administration from SMU in Dallas, and my first, what I would call real job, was out of the Fort Worth branch office of IBM. So these debates give libertarians, as well as the general public, the opportunity to see what each candidate would do as president. So what I would like to do is go through and talk about what I would do, which is, as commander-in-chief, I would stop our involvement in foreign wars, stop subsidizing the defense of wealthy allies, and bring our troops home, and finally have peace. I would pardon free people convicted of exposing government corruption, violating unconstitutional dictates, or committing crimes without a victim. I would immediately stop construction on President Trump's border wall boondoggle, and I would eliminate quotas for immigration so that anyone who wishes to come to America could do so legally. I'd like to point out that I am the granddaughter of immigrants, and I would end the onerous IRS, which has too much power and too much control over our lives. I believe that it's not enough for the Libertarian candidate for president to be better than Trump or Biden. Our nominee has to be deeply principled with a long-term commitment, communicate libertarian ideas in a way that non-libertarians will understand, and show the benefits of libertarian proposals. I am that candidate. Thank you.
Thank you. John Monds.
For providing this opportunity for all of us to share with you what we believe are our credentials for representing you as your nominee for President of the United States. To give you a little bit of my background and let you know what kind of candidate am I. I was born in Detroit, Michigan. I'm a native. Graduated high school in Florida, and then finished college at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, with a Bachelor of Arts degree with a concentration in banking and finance. While I worked in industry for several years, for the last 20 years, I've been a stay-at-home dad and homeschool parent. While I'm a native of Michigan, my family and I have been living in Georgia for the past 20 plus years. And this is the home of my ancestors. My great-great-grandparents, Columbus and Mourning Ferguson, were actually slaves in Georgia. And it's to them that I've dedicated my race. As far as my libertarian credentials, I've run 4 times previously as a libertarian candidate and have garnered over 1.8 million votes for the LP. And I take what I do seriously. Part of what I also do is live the life. I've challenged traffic citations to a jury trial. That's how much I don't like government. What I'd like to do as your candidate is make sure that the messaging is correct. We must stay on the libertarian platform. Make sure that voters don't confuse our candidate with the other candidates, and we should be able to make that clear. So tonight, hopefully we'll share a lot more about what we'd like to do, and I'd like to ask for your support this weekend as we prepare for National Convention. Thank you.
And Judge Jim Gray.
Semi-native son from Texas. I went to Peace Corps training at San Marcos in Texas by the Southwest Texas State College. Y también hablo español como la gente todavía. But my background, you probably mostly know me as having been the vice presidential candidate with Governor Gary Johnson. I'm proud of that and we've carried that label just deeply proudly to today. But I also go way back from a libertarian standpoint. I was a lifelong Republican until the passage of the so-called Patriot Act, and that just did me in. I could not be a part of any group that would condone, much less assist this direct frontal attack on our civil liberties. So I became a libertarian. It took me 13 seconds to do that. I was the 2004 candidate here in California for US Senate. Actually, David Nolan was really active in my campaign. But then I was also in the Peace Corps, like I said. I was awarded a combat action ribbon in Vietnam. I was also a Navy JAG attorney for 4 years, staff judge advocate, et cetera, with Navy JAG. And then a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. I prosecuted, it ended up heading units to prosecute frauds against the FHA and VA. But it goes on and on. I would put up my background against any presidential candidate in any party. And in 1992, did that truly libertarian thing of, as a sitting judge, held a a press conference stating my conclusions as a former drug warrior that our nation's drug policy is not working. So I just ask you, there's a lot I've written. Go to judgejimgray.com. I've written pretty much about all these issues. Go to graysharp2020.com. See my libertarian white paper, which talks about what a libertarian world would look like. That's what we're striving for. We're all doing that together. We have the same goals. I'm more of an incrementalist. I want to move the ball down the field. Others want to go for broke. Usually, if you ask for all or nothing, you usually get nothing. I want to win the game. So thank you.
Thank you. And Vermin Supreme.
Hello, my name is Vermin Supreme. I am a meme. I'm a lifetime member of the Libertarian Party, and I'm seeking the Libertarian Party nomination. I am an internationally recognized, highly respected political satirist, activist, and performer. For over 30 years, I've been using humor and satire as a successful anti-authoritarian communication strategy to mock and delegitimize the duopoly. Yes, I have a boot, and it is a magic boot. And part of the magic in the boot that it has allowed me to reach an audience across the political spectrum of tens of millions of people around the globe and earn free media across the flat earth. It has allowed me to intersperse myself in between protesters and riot police to help assure safety. It has given me, this little method to my madness, a level of notoriety and reach that allows me to make this legitimate and credible offer of my services as a candidate to the Libertarian Party. Now, I do believe that we can indeed use humor and satire as an effective weapon against the duopoly. I believe that we can indeed use humor and satire as an effective means of outreach, recruitment, and education to the greater public at large. Now, can a serious party put up a perceived joke candidate and then not have that stick to them? I believe the answer is absolutely yes. It's absolutely in the framing. It is simply owning the joke and owning it hard. Hashtag in on the joke. Yes, we are a serious party. We have been a serious party for many years, and we are accomplishing serious things. However, the current duopoly presidential electoral cycle and system has risen to the level of a joke, and with love and with spite and with my VP Spike, here's Vermin Supreme. I bring a certain level of gravitas and levity to the process. And I'm also wanting to serve as your candidate. So thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for your introductions. I want to let you know we're going to start the first phase of questioning here. And just to let you know in advance, for the second phase, we will do questions directed at individual candidates. And during that time, if there's a question that you want to answer that wasn't posed directly to you, you will have that opportunity for one question. So think about that as we move forward into that, and I'll remind you of that opportunity later. Also know that throughout this process, if your name is mentioned in another candidate's response, you will have an opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal. So just bear that in mind as we move forward. And with that, the first question will be for all candidates. And you will have 2 minutes to answer this question. And we're going to start with Joe Jorgensen. What executive experience do you have that will contribute to your ability to serve as President of the United States?
I actually ran a company in 1995. I've started a few companies. Many of them were just smaller companies with me and a couple other employees. However, in the mid-90s, I had a company that reached $2.2 million in sales and had employed 25 people. And I'd like to remind you that that would be closer to $5 million now compared to early 1990s dollars. However, Even more importantly, I have a Master of Business Administration and I have a PhD in Industrial Organizational Psychology. So not only do I have the experience, but I know the research behind it. And interestingly enough, we know from research that experience doesn't always give you the best measure of performance. So what you need is you need what's called knowledge, skills, and abilities. And I do have the knowledge, skills, and abilities. However, when running for president, part of the purpose of the presidential candidate isn't to lead once they're in office. Part of the job is to go out and spread the libertarian message to other people, to Americans who either haven't heard of us or who heard of us and they don't understand our position. So I think I'm the best candidate to translate our ideas into easy concepts that Americans understand and persuade them to vote for us. After all, I am a teacher. I teach at Clemson University, so I'm used to taking abstract ideas and translating them. For instance, when I was on a radio show during my VP campaign, somebody called in and said, well, we can't get rid of the post office. I would be worried about competing post offices stealing my mail out of my mailbox. And so I asked the caller, well, have you ever had a package delivered by FedEx? And he said, yeah. And I said, what about UPS? And he said, yeah. I said, were you worried about the FedEx guy stealing the UPS box? And he said, well, no, come to think of it. So I think I'm the candidate to spread the message.
Thank you. Adam Kokesh, same question. Tell us about your executive experience.
Well, first, just to respond to Judge Gray, yo sé complacer en español también. And as for this question, Whitney, it's a very important question for us to be asking as libertarians. But if they can get you to ask the wrong questions, you'll never come upon the right answers. And what you're really asking us to do is play this game of, look at me, I look good in a suit, I can be president, I can be in charge of this massive institution and wield these levers of power that no human being should have access to in the first place. None of the candidates running for president, and least of all, Donald Trump and Cadet Bone Spurs, Sleepy Creepy Joe, the kid sniffer Biden, none of them have the ability to actually run the federal government in a meaningful way as individuals, to steer it in some positive direction beyond the bureaucracy that has overrun the system today. So I really do agree with Joe's point that, what we should be looking for in a libertarian nominee is someone who can be the best messenger and wake people up. And frankly, it's a bit of a fantasy to think that someone who doesn't have any proven success as a messenger before now, as the nominee, is suddenly going to become successful. I have a proven record with my media production, with Adam versus the Man, with my activism. We've got over 250,000 subscribers, over 80 million views. That's just on my YouTube channel. Social media following that I've developed. The book that I self-published that has over 250,000 copies in print and over 4 million downloads. And this is, if you want me to play the game, I can say, look, I was a Marine, I was a sergeant in combat. I know how to lead troops in the harshest of conditions and under fire. I came out of there with my combat action ribbon as well. And, I've led a number of teams in activism, organizing events like the Veterans March for Ron Paul in the White House, where we had about 500 veterans marching in formation, a really beautiful scene of veterans standing up to the war machine. I've led a number of small businesses, with Adam versus the Man, of course, is the main one right now. What I'm doing here with my homestead, the Garden of Freedom, and Big Igloo Geodesics, making geodesic domes. I've always been someone who's been able to organize and lead efforts to spread the message of freedom. And I think that's what's most important for a candidate.
Thank you. Same question to Vermin Supreme. Tell us about any executive experience you have that would contribute to your ability to serve as president of the United States.
Well, I've certainly been in the position where I've had to make some rather executive decisions, or at least in that capacity, although not as an executive per se. Of course, my activities out in the protest demonstration world on the streets have put me directly in between riot police and protesters, and I have had to make some judgment calls that have involved safety decisions and things like that. I've also been affiliated with the Rainbow Gatherings, a temporary autonomous zone of up to 10,000 people. It occurs every year in the woods, where everything that happens there, it is an anarchistic organism, and there are many different caucuses, or rather councils, as they would refer to themselves, that make things happen. The only reason that anything occurs there, anything from chopping vegetables, chopping woods, to interfacing with the police, or helping in parking, or any one of the other million bits of infrastructure, requires cooperation and people coming together to make things happen. One of the spin-offs of that particular event, because they had so much experience serving so many people in the woods with so little, was a spin-off group called the American Rapid Rainbow Relief. And they did disaster relief after Katrina and after Sandy. And I was involved in the communications and public relations part of that operation. That's about it. But, you know, trust me. Trust me.
Thank you. Jacob Hornberger, same question.
Well, I managed the law office for several years. After my law partner, my dad, passed away, I moved to Dallas and started my own law practice and managed that. And then I've managed the Future of Freedom Foundation for 30 years, which I emphasize does not endorse my candidacy. But this race goes much more beyond that. That, as I've said from the very beginning, this is really a conflict of visions. Remember those 4 books that I discovered in the Laredo Public Library? They were these hardcore principled pieces, mostly on economics, that showed how the welfare state way of life had destroyed our freedom in this country, because it's funded by the IRS and the income tax. So I learned that if I want to be free, and that at that very moment when I discovered libertarianism, I said, I want to be free. And that's the reason I've jumped in this race. I want to be free. I want everyone to be free in my lifetime. Y'all heard Tim Martinez at the beginning said that freedom is our northern star here, North Star. That's what we're striving for. The question is, how do we get there? I say after 49 years, we go for everything. We go for the big enchilada, that we go to our fellow Americans and make the case for liberty. That's the only way you can strike at the root. The candidates in this race want to reform Social Security. They want to reform Medicare. They want to go through incrementalism. I heard this argument 30 years ago when I was on the platform committee. They said, Jacob, you're going to have to wait 30 years because people were 30 at that point, and you're going to have to wait 30 years for the 60-year-olds to get 90. And I'm sitting there saying, I'm going to be 70. Now I'm 70, and they're saying the same thing. We got to phase out these socialist programs, Jacob. And that's what they are, socialism. My campaign is different. It's a bold campaign. It strikes at the root and goes right to Democrats and Republicans and says, look what you have done with your welfare state. And oh, by the way, your warfare state, your national security state too. I say we push all in and make the case for liberty to our fellow Americans.
Thank you, Mr. Hornberger. John Monds, please tell us about the executive experience you have that would help you serve as President of the United States.
Well, I started my career in investment banking, and then worked in customer service at a regional airline. For the past 20 years, I've been a stay-at-home dad and a homeschool parent. And out of my 4 students, 2 are college graduates, 1's a college senior. Now, I've done a lot of things in my community, and that's where my experience lies, along with the LP. I've been on the LP Georgia Executive Committee for a number of years, leading that. I've started a local affiliate in my community. But I've also been involved with the NAACP as a branch president here in Grady County. And we've taken on, in many cases, government that was being unjust, to local citizens. I've been banned and thrown out of school board meetings. I've taken on the sheriff, the county commission. That's where my leadership comes from. I was also on the board of Habitat for Humanity. I love the organization, the fact that we're using donations and sweat equity to help build homes in our community. I did financial literacy classes with local students, underprivileged kids. And that's what I do. I work hard in my community. And I'm not here to be the leader, of people's lives. I believe in individual liberty. And as president, all of that goes towards returning freedom and liberty to everyone's lives. And that's what's important.
Thank you. Daniel Berman, same question.
So I want to point out that Adam had some really good points. This isn't about our executive experience because we're not running to be executives. But let me tell you about my experience with government. And I want to preface this with Mr. Monds. I really have a lot of respect for you and everything that you do. But I want to point something out about what you said during your introduction statement, that you've gone and you've fought traffic tickets. This is absolutely the wrong way to approach this because you're playing their game. I haven't had a driver's license for over 12 years. I've gotten tickets, and when they come after me for money, I tell them to go walk in. And they haven't been able to get any money out of me since. In fact, sometimes when they come after me, I threaten to sue them under a little federal law that protects us from them, and they go away, they disappear. And this is what we should be teaching people, not how to play the game, but how to recognize that this is all just a system of smoke and mirrors, and we shouldn't be playing along. We shouldn't be asking for authority. So, Mr. Monds, while you may know how to drive the car, I know how to disassemble the car. And that's what's really important here. This is what the libertarian idea needs to be. How can we disassemble this car without leaving everybody stranded? I also haven't paid income tax in most of the past 15 years. And over this weekend, I put together TIT Fest, Taxation is Theft Fest, which was an amazing festival with over 40 speakers talking about all kinds of information about this, bringing this information all around the world. We had people tuning in from all over the world, including Iraq, Pakistan, Australia, and we even had an Australian libertarian candidate. It's called the Democratic Liberal Party down there, but those are the real libertarians. And he even gave us an ad to run during our live stream of his campaign that he's running down there. We've had people tune in from around the world. And this is really how we need to spread this message and get it in front of people and teach people not to fall for the smoke and mirrors.
Thank you. And Judge Gray, same question.
May I respond? He mentioned my name.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Mr. Monds, you have 30 seconds to rebut that. Thank you.
Let me talk quickly about that case. And one, I would ask Dan about, whether he's married with kids. I know about, driving without a license. But in that particular case, I fought 2 counts on a traffic citation. I took it to a jury trial. I won 1 count, lost the other. And they wanted me to pay the government over $200, and I refused to do so. I did have to work some community service, but they didn't get a dime from me because I'm not trying to support them. And that's why I fought it in the first place. So,
but they got your labor. They forced you to work. This is like, and with all due respect,
you had your time to answer this question. We have another candidate who needs to answer this one. So Judge Gray, please go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you, Whitney. I guess I'm lucky number 7, but look, I have really unique experience administratively. I was a trial court judge for 25 years. I was trained to listen. Imagine that. I was trained to assess credibility of people giving me information, to assess the information itself, the credibility of that. And finally, then, of course, I'd have to consider and make a decision. That's called really administrative experience, and then explain it. Of course, I can also go back through my life. I led a peace march when I was at second-year law school, May of 1970. We left USC campus up to steps of City Hall in Los Angeles, sent 20,000 letters to President Nixon saying, get our troops out of Cambodia. I was a staff judge advocate, with, in effect, giving recommendations to the commanding officer of the Naval Air Station. But all of these things really pale in comparison to what I've been able to do with regard to our down ballot candidates, that I use this experience. Lauren Doherty is one of your delegates, and I used that in her Justice of the Peace race, which she ran famously well. And I've donated her money. I gave her recommendations, talked to her about the ins and outs of running. And that's what our candidate needs to do, is to not only inspire the voters instead of scare them, but inspire them to libertarianism, to make libertarianism accessible. Larry Sharp and I, Judge Jim Gray, do that famously. We've done it for the last numbers of years. We'll continue to do it off into the future. That's my administrative experience. I'm proud of it, and it's effective.
Thank you. All right, on to the next question. Again, for all candidates, this time the responses will be limited to 1 minute. So it's also important that you stay on topic. There are 2 men running for president right now whose baggage includes multiple accusations of sexual assault, harassment, or otherwise inappropriate behaviors. Yet somehow these 2 men are front runners for the Democrat and Republican parties. Knowing that the Libertarian Party will always be held to a higher standard, and we cannot afford to present a candidate that has a history of abusing authority or mistreating people, do you have confidence in your character that will hold up under the extreme scrutiny that comes with a general election? And if you've endorsed a candidate for vice president, do you also have confidence in their character? Judge Gray, you'll be first this time. He's muted. Can't hear him.
Sorry, I was muted, but I talk about scrutiny, Whitney. I was a judge for 25 years. You don't think judges come under scrutiny? If I'd go to the hardware store on Saturday, I'd have to put on a shirt. People really are critical about judges. I don't have anything in my background there. When I was in the Navy, I received a top secret clearance, and I don't think it's particularly changed from there. So I'm not concerned about that. I don't comment about other candidates. I won't comment about the Republican or the Democrat. I talk about Judge Jim Gray, and by the way, gladly talk about Larry Sharpe, who is just as good as it gets. Not only credibility in his background. Look at the Larry Sharpe story on his website. He's overcome numbers of obstacles. Nothing wrong there. And I don't call him Mr. Libertarian for nothing. And a lot of people join me in that.
Thank you. Dan Berman, same question. Do you need
you might find some really embarrassing photos of me on the internet with this ridiculous big yellow hat. But of course, that hat says taxation is theft all over it. So if they want to take that and they want to make that in front of the public stage and criticize that, let them plaster that all over TV. Let that message get out there. Of course, that's why I'm wearing my hat tonight. And what's really amazing about that is many people, they like to say that's a terrible idea, that's a bad image, that's bad branding. People are still coming to me today telling me, hey, you would be the best candidate ever if only you would get rid of that hat. I haven't had that hat in over a month and nobody's noticed. This is because it works. It gets the message across, it gets in people's heads and it stays there. Do you want something that's got a real message on it like taxation is theft? Or do you want the image of a naked man dancing across a stage? I think the hat leaves a better impression.
Can you tell me if your character will stand up to scrutiny?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. John Monds, same question. And just as a reminder, the question is, do you have confidence that your character will hold up under the extreme scrutiny that comes with a general election? And if you have endorsed a vice presidential candidate, do you believe that of them too?
Absolutely. You know, I have no worries about when you are in these positions, and I've run for office 4 times previously as a libertarian, you expect scrutiny. You expect people to look into your background. I've been married now for the past 22 years, hopefully to make it to 23. And you can ask any of my friends and my associates, all the people that have worked with me over the years, and you can interview all of them. You know, I wouldn't expect anything that would damage the credibility of my campaign, the LP's image. And no, I have not endorsed any vice presidential candidate at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Hornberger.
Yeah, I've always stood up in my life. The answer is yes, but I've always tried to stand up for what I believe is right, and especially on ethics, both when I was practicing law and in politics and everywhere. I think ethical principles are of the utmost importance, and that the Libertarian Party should take the lead in terms of ethical principles and right conduct. I paid a big price for it over my life for taking those stands, but it's been worth it. But having said that, if I win this nomination, and I have absolutely no interest in going after Trump or Biden on these kind of issues, y'all know that I've run this campaign hard, but it's all on issues. That's what I want to run against the Democrats and Republicans. What they've done to this country with their welfare state, strike the root at their welfare state, what they've done with their warfare state, with their drug war, their immigration control system. That's where I want to go after them, solely on issues using our principles, our ideals, and sound ideas on liberty. This is where we're strong. This is where they're weak. I say hit them hard with issues only.
Thank you. Berman Supreme.
Well, yes. In my long and storied career as a communicator, I have engaged in occasional offensive or tasteless speech. That is true, but nothing that would, nothing as a disqualifier. I believe seeking this nomination. I believe that I have an ethical person, and I'm generally perceived to be a wholesome person. So yes, there you go.
Thank you. And have you declared?
And Spike is a stand-up guy. Oh yes, absolutely. Spike Cohen, I fully believe is an absolutely trustworthy, upright, moral, ethical human being. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kokesh, same question. Do you have confidence that your character will hold up under the extreme scrutiny that comes with the general election? And if you have endorsed a vice presidential candidate, do you have confidence in their character as well?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I believe my character is above and beyond the standard that we should expect in terms of something that can connect and inspire with other people who are reaching as candidates. My story is one of transformation, having done what I thought was the right thing and joined the Marine Corps and gone so far as to follow orders to torture detainees and guarding them in Fallujah in 2004 because I volunteered to go to Iraq, to put my life on the line, to do the right thing. And as an activist, my civil disobedience record has shown that I have inspired countless millions in standing up to authority, being that middle finger to the man saying, no, I will not submit, I will not obey, I will not lie down and accept this tyranny. And what I have done since embracing the non-aggression principle is absolute adherence to that and broadcasting that as loud and clear as I can and winning people over. John McAfee, who I've endorsed, and I would be happy to work with any of these other candidates as a nominee for vice president or with them as a running mate. I think he brings not only a unique corporate credibility and experience to this race, but his spirit of disobedience is one that has inspired me and countless millions as well.
Thank you. All right, and Joe Jorgensen.
Absolutely, my character would stand up. And no, I do not have a running mate to endorse, so it's just me. So I'd like to point out that I've got two added bonuses here. First of all, I've got a profession which is held in high regard. They've done polls many times over the years asking people, who do you trust? What professions do you trust? And college professors and teachers usually come out pretty high. I'd like to point out, though, I am a senior lecturer, however, that's a pretty transparent difference to students. Also, I made it through the 1970s, never having tried marijuana, and from high school and college. And so this is an example of how when I go out, I talk about the practical benefits. I don't say it's my body, I want to do what I want. I say, hey, mothers, would you like your children to be safer? Would you like to not have a drug dealer trying to sell your children drugs at the school playground? So this would be a practical standpoint that I could emphasize.
Thank you. All right, next question, candidates. This one will again be for all of you. The answers will be limited to 1 minute. We have been at war since I personally was a freshman in high school, and before then, even if you count the Cold War. In what order would you end our current foreign engagements if you were elected president? We'll start with Mr. Hornberger this time.
Issue an order to the Secretary of Defense to bring all the troops home from everywhere, Korea, Europe, World War II's over, Afghanistan, Iraq, Africa, Latin America, Middle East, bring them all home. And this is what distinguishes my campaign: discharge them. End America's foreign policy of interventionism totally. But you got to go further than that. The national security state is an alien totalitarian governmental structure. I'm the only one in this race that stands in favor of dismantling it. It should never have come into existence after World War II. I favor a limited government republic, which was our founding governmental system with a basic military force whose only mission is to protect the United States. That you cannot live in a free society as long as you have the CIA, the NSA, the Pentagon, and what Eisenhower called the vast military industrial complex. A free society necessarily presupposes the restoration of a limited government republic. That's what I would make the case for to our fellow Americans.
Thank you. Berman Supreme.
Yes, I would end the wars alphabetically from Afghanistan to Yemen. And yes, that is consistent with the Libertarian Party platform, ending all foreign wars and bringing the troops home. Absolutely, 100%. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joe Jorgensen, again, in what order would you end our current foreign engagements if elected president of the United States?
I'm sorry, how long do we get for this question? Okay, thank you. The first day in office, this is top priority. First day in office, I would meet with the Pentagon and begin bringing the troops home and bringing them home from everywhere. And I'd like to mention, Jacob just said that he stands alone in his belief in the small military and not having a large complex. No, I've been with that since the start. And in fact, I've been handing out a sheet. I had been handing out a sheet in the in-person conventions explaining my position and how I want to bring all the troops home, not only bring all the troops home, but no embargoes, no sanctions, no tariffs. So I want to have just free peace, free trade among countries. I'd like to point out that when we do this, of course, no military aid, no foreign aid, and the benefits, we get to foster peace, we'd stop human casualties, we'd stop massive property damage caused by war, and it would also cut back on our taxes and spending.
Thank you. Mr. Kokesh.
Whitney, do I get a response?
Oh, yes, I apologize for that. 30 seconds for your rebuttal. Thank you.
That's not what I said. I said that I stand alone in the dismantling of the national security state. In the last debate, Joe said that she favors the CIA. I asked her specifically, would you abolish it or reform it? She says, I will keep it and I will put it under the auspices of the Pentagon. Same thing with the NSA. That's what she would do, is put it under the auspices of the Pentagon. This is a Chinese model of a national security state. I would abolish the CIA, abolish the NSA, and restore a limited government republic.
Thanks.
That's what distinguishes my campaign, because it's necessary for a free society.
Mr. Kokesh.
Yeah, thank you. That's funny to hear that clarification from Mr. Hornberger again, trying to stand alone as the only one dismantling. He knows what my platform is in taking the entire federal government down to the state level, localizing it. You know, your question, Whitney, is a bit of a softball for libertarians. Asking us which is our favorite war to end the soonest is kind of like asking what's your favorite kind of cancer. Get rid of all of them. Get them ended as soon as possible. With my platform, we immediately cease all active combat operations all over the world and begin the logistical process of bringing all the troops home from abroad and closing all the foreign military bases. We've got veterans for Kokesh because we have so many people inspired by this message who understand that the founders' vision of a decentralized militia-based defense is the only ethical one. Localization is a very moderate, practical first step in the right direction that we can take together. Now, Whitney, I'm not a grammar Nazi, but I do want to point out something in your question that rubbed me the wrong way when you said "our" in describing these wars. The Dalai Lama was asked when he was told, or he was asked, what was the first thing you would do if you were president? He said, I would call things by their proper names. Politicians are criminals, war is murder, taxation is theft, and government is a racket.
Mr. Hornberger, since Mr. Kokesh did mention you in this, you will have another 30-second rebuttal.
Well, he's absolutely right. I stand corrected that Adam and I and Vermin, who's an anarchist, we all stand for the dismantling of the national security state. The difference is I want to restore a limited government republic. Joe and Jim both favor the national security state. They've made that very clear. Joe wants to put the CIA and the NSA under the auspices of the Pentagon, which is the Chinese model of a national security state. Jim wants to keep it as is. I say you cannot have a free society. We have to strike at this root, just as like we do with the welfare state. The welfare and warfare state need to be dismantled.
And Judge Jim Gray.
So do I get to reply
to the question?
You know, he mentioned Berman Supreme. He mentions lots of people. Unless there's some theme that there is something dilatory about it, just because he mentioned somebody, Whitney, why let them have the 30 seconds? If I mention Vermin Supreme, does that mean that I just mentioned his name gets another 30 seconds? Just silly. But at any rate, may I have a chance?
You're filibustering.
It is your turn.
Look, the first answer is every time our troops are now in combat, it's illegal. It's unconstitutional. There's not been a declaration of war. The answer is bring them, yank them out, bring them home. The answer to that is clear. I was running for U.S. Senate when we were in 2004 talking about going into Iraq. I told anyone who would listen, if we put troops into Iraq, it would be the biggest mistake of my lifetime. We disabled that whole area. Now look at Syria, etc. No, the answer is no. However, let's be realistic here. Nobody is going to bring the troops home right away. It's going to be a transition. It has to be a transition. I believe in contracts. We have treaties that obligate us to be in various places. We have agreements that obligate us to be there. So let's let's negotiate them back as quickly as we can. And by the way, we're still going to have Marines protecting our embassies as well. And I believe in freedom of the seas, which means we should in fact do our part to maintain freedom of the seas. That is in our national interest.
Thank you. Daniel Berman, the assumption is, as some candidates have already made, is that all libertarian candidates will bring all the troops in the wars. So the actual question is, in what order would you end our current foreign engagements if elected president? Dan Berman.
Well, I want to say all of them on day one, including the war on drugs. I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed in Vermin Supreme for ending at Yemen, leaving Zambia and Zimbabwe out there. But something else I want to talk about, because everybody always wants to end all the wars. This is a libertarian platform, of course. But nobody wants to talk about what are the jobs when all of these troops come home. What about jobs? I have the new American dream, which actually is going to solve all those problems. And what about reparations? How come libertarians do not talk about reparations? If you get out there and talk to Democrats, there are a lot of them who are talking about that. And this is a very important issue I think we should be talking about in these debates.
Thank you.
So do I get to respond because Jacob mentioned me?
Because Jacob mentioned you. I think he would mention you in response to your comment about him. So we're going to move on.
But,
okay. Mr. Monds.
Yes, and in answer to the question, you begin with in the countries that the soldiers are in the most danger, and that's definitely going to be Iraq and Afghanistan. So that's where you begin. And then you just go down the list. And I disagree with the candidate. I'll refuse to mention his name, that doesn't think that we can't bring home all the troops starting immediately. And why is
we can?
First of all, you have to make the case to the American public of why you want to do it. I'm not afraid of scaring them when they realize the amount of lies that have gotten us into these foreign engagements in the first place. It's bankrupting the country with this military industrial complex. You have to be able to make the case. You just don't give up on it as a libertarian candidate and say, well, I can't make the argument to the American people because they're going to be scared. You know, they ought to be scared of the government they currently have and be willing to transfer and go in another direction with the libertarian nominee.
Thank you, Mr. Monds. So we're going to have one more question that is presented for all of you before we start our more personalized segment here. These, again, will be 1-minute answers, and we're going to start with Vermin Supreme this time. If you were elected president of the United States, what would your leadership cabinet look like? Who will you ask to serve in specific roles?
The bestest and the brightest, the most qualified and hugest, most amazing cabinet that you can ever even imagine. Thank you.
Judge Gray.
Well, thank you. First of all, it would be on merit. We would, of course, have libertarians, independents, but as I say, we would also have Republicans and Democrats as long as they agreed with our philosophy of responsibility. No, don't tread on me, don't tread on anybody. The rest of that as well, that you treat each other well. But I think it's inappropriate to name names. I think that would imply that they're supporting my campaign, et cetera. But we're going to then get over this polarization, Whitney, that, you know, when we have problems with the Republicans, for example, say, go talk to your colleagues, get them on board, kind of like Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals. No holds barred. We will discuss things with each other, not outside, and we will hone this in a crucible there to come up with what is right. And I have people in mind. I actually have someone in mind to head a commission to look into these things once we win the nomination.
Thank you. Joe Jorgensen, same question.
Well, the most important thing is I would get rid of many cabinet positions, so it wouldn't matter who I elected to those because we wouldn't have them. So for instance, get rid of the Secretary of Education, get rid of the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, get rid of Homeland Security, get rid of a lot of these, agriculture. We let the free market take care of our food supply. We let state and local at a state and local government, let them handle education. Of course, I'd like to see that done privately. Education should be in the hands of teachers and parents and students to where they get the kind of education they want, higher quality education. For anything that would be remaining, and it would be very few, I would have, I would basically go to Cato first and start picking there. And I followed Michael Tanner for the past 30 years. And I think he understands a lot of the different domestic issues. So if I had a cabinet secretary left, he would be my first choice.
Thank you. John Monds, what would your leadership cabinet look like? Who, if anyone, would you ask to serve in specific roles?
I think there's plenty of talent out there just amongst the Libertarian Party. In my life experience in the various organizations I've been involved with, there's plenty of good people that understand a lot better than those that have been in power. But 90% of the government from the start shouldn't even exist. It's not constitutional. So similar to what the previous candidate said, first of all, we're going to whittle down government. And I mentioned, for example, Supreme Court nominee, somebody like Scott Bullock that works with the Institute of Justice. I really like that organization and what they've done with reducing licensing, civil forfeiture. So you find the talented people exist. So when we need to dismantle and get rid of this government, there's a wealth of very great talent out there.
Thank you. Mr. Hornberger, same question.
Yeah, what I'd love to do in this campaign, if I were accorded the honor of this nomination, is to raise the vision of the American people to a higher level. To what does it really mean to be free? I would love to have every American family discussing and debating that question. And what is the role of government in a free society? Well, once people start thinking at that level, then we don't think in terms of liberty of putting libertarian managers of the welfare state. If all we're going to do is appoint libertarians to run the Social Security Administration, the IRS, the DEA, and the rest of these welfare state agencies, we haven't achieved freedom. What I want to be raising their vision of is dismantle these things and end up with like the Secretary of the Treasury and the Attorney General, where of course I'd appoint a libertarian lawyer. There's plenty of those. And then one of the Austrian economists to run the Department of the Treasury. But all the rest, just dismantle it. The IRS and the Federal Reserve and all the things they fund in the welfare state and in the warfare state.
Thank you. Adam Kokesh.
Well, I would first start by appointing Donald Trump to be in charge of medicating politicians so that they can all suffer the side effects of hydroxychloroquine, as he might be soon here. Now, this is a great question. I think it's incumbent upon us to have practical plans and be able to name names and people who are supporting these policies. I got to say, I'm most excited about Cynthia McKinney having her endorsement, former Green Party nominee for president and six-term Democrat congresswoman from Georgia, who has done so much great work in challenging government authority. She was called the Ron Paul of the Democrat Party when she was in Congress. To have Mark Edge with Free Talk Live taking apart the Bureau of Prisons, to have John McAfee, who's endorsed this platform, taking apart the CIA, to have Edward Snowden taking apart the NSA, to have Judge Napolitano as the custodial attorney general, making sure that we release every single person possible who's in federal prison for victimless crimes. And, Albert Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And a lot of these other policies that I hear from these other candidates are based on some kind of fantasy that gives into endorsing the existing system, that doesn't give the American people a way to say, we're putting our foot down. We're not putting up with this crap any longer. We are withdrawing our consent. Fully dismantling the government at the federal level is the way to achieve that.
Please tell us what your leadership cabinet will look like and who you might ask to serve in specific roles.
Absolutely. So I think some good points were made that we don't want to appoint people to the heads of departments that aren't going to be there anymore. However, we do have the campaign stage where we can put these people in front of America and have them explain why they don't need these departments. I would actually happily announce Joe Bannister, who is a former IRS agent who was at Taxationist Theft Fest last weekend, explaining how the income tax is unconstitutional and how it's unconstitutionally collected. I would have somebody explain to people how handing out flyers that talk about jury nullification outside of a courthouse is a constitutional First Amendment right, and everybody should be doing that. I would have Arvin Vohra talking about jury nullification to everybody. I would actually have, and despite our differences, I would have everybody on this debate stage out there as part of my cabinet explaining to America why we don't need these programs and how we can move forward without them. And really, that's something that we can do without talking about the fantasy of putting them in charge once the agencies themselves are shut down.
Thank you. Okay, candidates, we're now going to move into some questions for you as individuals. And just a reminder, if you hear a question that is not asked of you and you would like to respond to that question, you each have one opportunity to do so. So I guess choose wisely. The first individual question is for Jacob Hornberger. You will have 2 minutes to answer this. And the question is, seated here where I am tonight, I'm about 175 miles from the US-Mexico border. The Libertarian Party of Texas, which is the LP's second largest affiliate and the host of tonight's debate, takes notice on matters of the border. Your stated position per your website supports open immigration, which you describe as the free movements of people across international borders. This aligns with the Libertarian Party's platform on immigration. However, some in our party do not agree with this stance and favor stricter border enforcement. Can you take a moment right now to explain to libertarians why your position on borders and immigration is the libertarian position?
Absolutely. And it's a position that when I learned the Libertarian Party stood for this, it was one of the greatest moments of my libertarian life. That I grew up on the border. I've seen this tyranny firsthand. I've seen the highway checkpoints. And those of you that have been to Laredo know about that checkpoint about 40 miles north. Border Patrol were busting into our farm without a warrant. They busted workers that we hired that were illegal immigrants. I mean, I've seen this tyranny firsthand. And this is the thing. You know, some of the candidates here, they want to do this piecemeal. Oh, I'm gonna end quotas for countries. It's not enough to end quotas. You've got to end this massive immigration control system. It's a socialist system. We libertarians stand against socialism. It's central planning. Look at the visa system that exists independent of the quota system. You got family visas, you've got work visas, you've got tourist visas. And then, so you've got to, if you have this system of refugee status and stuff, you have to have an enforcement mechanism. It's not enough to say, I oppose Donald Trump's Berlin Wall. You've got to oppose the entire structure, because that comes with the highway checkpoints, the warrantless searches of ranches and farms like my farm, the boarding of Greyhound buses, the criminalization of helping illegal immigrants. There's death involved here. Go Google man 3-year-old daughter and you'll see the bodies there. All of this violates our core principle, which is the non-aggression principle. When a person crosses a border peacefully, he is not violating rights. When people cross the border from Maryland into Virginia, they're not violating anyone's rights. That's why we need to dismantle this entire system, including the immigration, the visa service, ICE, the Border Patrol, and have the same free movements of people and goods and services. I stand for unilateral free trade across borders the same way we have domestically. It's the only system that's consistent with religious, moral, ethical, and freedom principles.
Thank you, Mr. Hornberger. Next question is for Joe Jorgensen. We have an historical tendency in this country to elect white men of a certain age. And many libertarians and Americans in general are calling for options that reflect a more broader and diverse identity of voters. So what would you say to those people who seek such alternatives? You have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, I guess my first response would be, I am that alternative. If somebody is looking for an alternative, and I do believe that I would get additional media coverage, because we do have 2 old, rich white guys running for the Democrat and Republican Party. However, I don't want to be nominated because I am a woman. I want to be nominated because I'm the best candidate, because I can explain issues. I believe that soccer moms will listen to me, and I can go to them. And to finish what I was saying before about drugs, for instance, I wouldn't go to soccer moms and say, hey, it's my body, I can do what I want, it's my money, I should be able to keep it. Instead, I would go to soccer moms and I would say, wouldn't you like to have your children be safer? Let me explain how we can make our children safer. And I am a mother. In fact, I'm now a grandmother as well. And so people tend to listen to people who are the same demographic. We tend to look towards people who are the same sex. So women would be able to identify with me better, and I would be able to address the issues that they are interested in. So I would ask them, when was the last time you ever saw, two liquor store owners having a shootout on the corners? When was the last time you saw somebody breaking or heard of somebody breaking into a house because they needed to steal something so they could afford to buy vodka? That doesn't happen. The problem is not with the drugs. The problem is with the drug laws. And so I would appeal to women and say, wouldn't you like to have safer streets for your children? Wouldn't you like to send your kids off to school knowing that there's no longer the profit motive for people to sell to your children? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I answer that? Can I use this one question?
Who is that talking?
John Monds.
Sure. Yes. I appreciate you doing that. Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people have the opinion that the LP is for old white guys, and that's just not true. And I'm here, and I've been here for over 15 years. But my message remains the same, no matter what the group is. It's about freedom, and my message and what I've done, and some of the outreach that I'd like to do, for example, is I've spoken to a national board member of the NAACP and told him about the candidacy, about the LP. And he was very encouraging about allowing me to be able to speak to branches all across the country because he knows me. We've done things together in my community. And, that's just one way that, I'm not playing identity, politics like Jo has mentioned herself. She's a woman, I'm an African-American, but we don't have to do that. We just are who we are. But in doing that, we have to realize that most American voters, they're going to vote for people for a lot of different reasons. And it's not just what they believe in and what they say. They may never even hear our message or go to our website, but give them an opportunity, to look at who we are and be accepting, and maybe open up to a new message, if we don't look like, everybody else. I think it's just a great opportunity, for, and the other parties, they play a game at it. Joe Biden's talking about getting a woman for a VP candidate. And once again, like Joe said, we're all good candidates. And the best thing is having a message that represents the party. And that if we get an opportunity to speak in front of somebody, that we can do so. And that's the most important thing, I believe.
Whitney, it's Judge Gray. May I add my minute on that too, please?
You bet.
Look, I certainly underscore what John said and Joe says, that there are plenty of people. I mean, we're all minorities in some ways and majorities in others, but there are plenty of people on merits that we can appoint, and we should tout them. But it's on merit. It's not because of any particular class. I have a podcast. I've been doing it for more than a year. It's called All Rise, The Libertarian Way with Judge Jim Gray. Notice I used the word libertarian there. And one of the sessions was someone who was saying libertarianism really is natural for African Americans and for minorities because it pushes equality, it pushes success, it gets you out of poverty. So we shouldn't have to have people because of a particular class. We just have lots of people that are meritorious that happen to be in that particular class. So good for John, good for Joe.
Thank you. All right, moving on. There's a candidate in this debate who is viewed by some as a caricature. He has changed his name. He wears a funny hat. Speaks in platitudes to his very devoted following. And we also have with us tonight Vermin Supreme. So Dan, what do you say to people who see no difference between your campaign and that of Vermin Supreme? And why should Libertarian Party delegates choose you and your message to represent our challenges to the current system? 2 minutes to respond.
Absolutely. So I think go to my YouTube channel, go to my social media pages, and you'll see a lot of reasons why. I talk about really important issues that are important to people outside of the Libertarian Party that libertarians won't talk about. I talk about transgender rights. I talk about women's rights. I talk about reparations. These are things that for some reason don't come up in these debates when we have a bunch of libertarians. We talk about monetary policy, who's going to end the Fed and how, and all these other things. That's great. But a majority of America cares about what am I going to do, especially right now when the government has shut down the entire economy and I don't have that paycheck to pay my rent. I have to choose between potentially getting evicted and feeding my kids this month. What do you tell them? And this is why I've created the New American Dream, which focuses on the fact that America is in debt, and it's in debt because of a systematic type of oppression that has been set there by government. Government has helped corporations raise prices to force us to borrow money just to get things that we need for our day-to-day life. This is absolutely against freedom. And we can sit here and say, oh yeah, but we have amazing technology and internet and TVs and everything. Yes, but we have debt. 87% of America is in debt. That's absolutely like anybody should look at this and see how ridiculous this is and understand we need to put an end to that. We need to get America out of debt. We need to own our property again and not pay property tax. We need to stop paying all these unconstitutional taxes. This is what I bring to the table. And I've been living this. I have gone out there. Like I said, I don't have a driver's license. I don't have any contract with the government except for my passport, just because they won't let me cross their imaginary lines sometimes. So I'm out here and I'm sharing this information, and any of my crazy followers who are drinking the Kool-Aid, if you talk to them, you'll know they're not just following me because of the Kool-Aid. They're following me not just because of the hat, but because I'm talking about real issues that are addressing them that the rest of the Libertarian Party is not.
Thank you. Vermin Supreme, since you were actually mentioned in the question itself, I would like to give you 30 seconds to respond if you want to. Otherwise, you're next on deck anyway.
Sure. I don't know if it's an actual response, but I did want to point out that, of course, there are anarchists in the party, but it is ultimately a party of anarchists and minarchists working together to help dismantle the state. And I think it's pretty clear that it is a political party operating within a political system, and the platform itself certainly assumes some sort of governmental structure. And you're talking about a military strong enough to repel invaders and all of these other things. All I'm saying is I'm simply acknowledging the fact that as anti-state as we all may be, the platform itself indicates that the party does accept the reality that we are in a government in the United States. Thank you.
Vermin Supreme, you can go ahead and stay there. You've got a 2-minute response here, and your question is, nearly 30 million people in the United States are uninsured, and a study found 66.5% of all bankruptcies were tied to medical issues. With the current pandemic catapulting the U.S. unemployment rate to over 14%, there are bound to be even more families facing financial ruin due to healthcare costs. As a Libertarian nominee for president, how would you address this issue, and what would be your plan for healthcare and health insurance in America?
Well, once again, the acknowledgement that a major part of the costs of healthcare are maintained in the bureaucratic environment. 1/3 of all healthcare costs are strictly bureaucratic in nature. So that's a very important thing to understand also. And of course, all the government interventions and requirements and the regulations that prevent people from purchasing drugs directly from international markets, for example, prescription drugs when they need prescriptions, the ability to, now at least we're being able to do some telemedicine and the like. So there's many innovations and types of things that we can in fact employ in the current environment if we're simply able to get the government out of the way and allow the market to pick up all that slack. The government is completely in the way of people accessing healthcare, and we need to allow the market to indeed do its thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to answer that one also.
Mr. Kokesh, you have.
There was someone who wanted to jump in.
I'd like to answer that one
first. Who was that?
This is Dan.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
So on my website, on my platform, I have actually two things: free healthcare and free education. And of course, it is very much like Vermin's plan. But the idea here is that we get a lot of people on the left, and I see people in the comments on this debate talking about it's impossible to reach people on the left right now, especially after this COVID thing. It's absolutely not. And while we all have this great libertarian plan of getting the government out, it's reaching to them is the hard part. And my plan has been reaching to them. And before any of this even happened, we got people from Andrew Yang's campaign, from Bernie Sanders' campaign, from all over the left to join and support us, because we recognize, yes, there is a problem with the healthcare, and we want to offer you another solution instead of just telling you that your solution is wrong. And we've gotten very far with that, and we've gotten a lot of support from the left. And somebody also mentioned, why am I bringing up reparations? We need to start thinking outside of the party and bringing in these people from the left. And it's the same reason I came up with this plan for healthcare as reparations. And it doesn't involve government handouts or any of these unconstitutional things. It just involves addressing their issues and giving them libertarian solutions.
Whitney, point of order. Would you please explain this unanswered question rule? I don't follow how that works.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
You said something earlier about if you feel a question hasn't been asked that you want to answer.
No, so the segment that we're in now, I am giving specific questions to individual candidates. So each one of you is getting your own question. But if there is a question that you hear another candidate answer that you would also like to respond to, you feel passionately about that topic, then I invite you to go ahead and also respond to it, even though it wasn't necessarily addressed to you.
I see. And you get 2 minutes to do that?
That's correct. The same time that the original responder would get.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Oh, may I ask a question as well? So do we have to respond to it right when you ask it, or can we wait to the end and then respond to it?
It's better to do it at that time because the topics are changing each time. So it's, if you want to answer that particular question, then it's better to do it right after the original responder.
Okay, well, I would like to answer the healthcare one too then.
Okay. Sure.
And I would point out to the American population that healthcare in this country is a special interest driven, poorly run system depriving people of quality care. And I would work to remove every government interference. So we have to look at, first of all, of course, the FDA. Right now, it costs about $1 billion to approve each drug because they have to test not only safety, but efficacy, a rule they didn't add until the FDA had been around for quite a while. And so now what we have is we've got drugs that never go to market because companies don't see it as profitable because they've got to jump through that hoop. Also, I would explain to the American people that single payer doesn't work. Basically, we've tried it in Hawaii and we've tried it in Vermont, and it was abandoned after a few months. Canada is the closest thing to Medicare for all. And if we look at the waiting lines, it's just horrendous. Canadians wait something like 21 weeks to see a specialist. Almost 40 weeks to see an orthopedic surgeon. I know I needed to have knee surgery and I think I saw somebody within a week. So single payer is not the answer. When I was in the third party debate in Chicago, the socialist was saying, oh, we've got to get profit out of healthcare because, you know, basically talking about the greedy doctors wanting profit. And my answer was, you better hope that doctors want profit because the only way you stay in business in the free market system is to offer the best price and the best quality. And we see that with the only two free market systems we have, which are cosmetic surgery and LASIK surgery. Those are the only two fields in healthcare in which price has gone down and quality has gone way up. So if we can get to a free market system, then Americans would be able to afford the doctor. They could go to a clinic at 11 o'clock at night instead of the emergency room, and it would dramatically lower the costs that they're paying.
Thank you.
I would like to address that question.
Okay. Is that Mr. Hornberger speaking?
Yes.
Okay.
It is not enough to talk about single payer and central planning and so forth. You've got to address the big elephants in the room, Medicare and Medicaid. We're looking at unfunded liabilities of two giant socialist programs, Social Security and Medicare, both of which some candidates in this race support. because they say that people are going to get scared. I told you I grew up in Laredo. It's the poorest city in the United States in the 50s. That's what the Census Bureau said. Doctors' offices were filled every day with poor people, including many from Nuevo Laredo, right across the bridge. No doctor ever turned away any patient for inability to pay. This is before Medicare, before Medicaid. They did it on a voluntary basis. This is what America was founded on. I've said it for 30 years. We've had this healthcare crisis long before Corona crisis, that there's only one solution, and that's get rid of this tumor on the body politic, Medicare and Medicaid. That's what caused healthcare costs to soar. Before Medicare and Medicaid, nobody even needed healthcare insurance. It was like going to the grocery store. You know, who has grocery store insurance to protect against bankrupting grocery prices? No one. That's the way it was. Healthcare costs were low. They were stable. People just paid cash. Medicare comes in. That's what caused the crisis. I published a book in 1994 called The Dangers of Socialized Medicine, that you cannot have a free society with these socialist programs. That's what I keep saying. We got to go to the American people. We got to be honest and genuine and say, this welfare state way of life has been a horror story for your health, for your economic well-being, for everything. We've got to strike at the root. And that root entails going after the crown jewels of this immoral system, Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, along with the national security state, the CIA and the NSA. That's how we achieve a free society, by making the case for freedom to our fellow Americans.
All right. Moving on now, Mr. Kokesh, 2-minute response. I saw you speak at an event in Austin a while back, and during that event, you said that if you were elected president, one of the first things you would do is initiate the bankruptcy procedures for the federal government. My question to you is, if that were the case, what message do you have for those to whom the U.S. owes money?
Well, when we talk about the federal debt, what we're talking about is a form of intergenerational child abuse. When you are forcing someone to pay for something that they never had a say in, you are taking away consent from that relationship. This is not a legitimate debt. Because the federal government said, we are going to pay you money and we are going to steal from future generations to do it, by itself makes this an illegitimate debt. You can't force contracts on people without their consent. And that's the best part of this platform, is that we give up the charade that is the national debt, that is an excuse to steal from us in taxes, where what you pay in income tax doesn't even come close to covering the premiums on this debt. So what are the interest rather on this debt? So this really gets to the heart of the matter with this platform versus every other candidate in this race. Consent. And we talk about coercion as libertarians, but most people outside of the party think of this as consent. You know, what's the difference between rape and making love? Consent. What's the difference between theft and charity? Consent. Slavery, freedom. Consent, statism, voluntarism. The difference is consent. And that's what's manifest in this platform. And I think this is the ultimate manifestation of libertarian character, not being authoritarian, not wanting to tell other people how to live their lives, not taking away their consent. That's why this platform has gotten so much traction in this primary, is that we're uniting Americans in reclaiming their sovereignty and saying, we don't have to consent to something that is not in our best interest, something that is being forced on us. We can withdraw our consent. We can take that away from the people who would violate our individual rights.
20 seconds though. What do you say to the people to whom the money is owed? How do you convince them that this is?
Well, when we talk about individual debts, when there are cases where the federal government has done injury to individuals, yes, actually, we are in a better position in this bankruptcy to honor the legitimate debts of the federal government. And those debts are to the American people. We are the ones who have been stolen from. The debts that are owed, that are the federal debt, are owed to foreign banks, foreign governments, and foreign corporations. And to them, I say, piss off. We are not going to let you bully us into paying these illegitimate debts. We, the American...
Mr. Monds. Mr. Monds, the next question is for you. You have 2 minutes to respond. Many people following this race for the Libertarian Party nomination say that they really like what they hear when they do hear from you, but they lament that they haven't heard enough. We recognize that the pandemic has thrown a wrench into all the campaigns, but still people say that they haven't, that you haven't done enough to get your message out. So here's a chance for you to do that tonight. So I'm asking you to go ahead and tell us about an issue that you are deeply passionate about and why. And then, of course, to tell us what it was that moved you to run for president, and specifically as a libertarian, if you would like.
Thank you. I mean, the top issue, the most important issue right now is bringing the troops and all the drones home. That is number one. So, that's what I've talked about. That is something the commander in chief, the president, can do unilaterally. And that's important. And when making the case, you don't scare people if you make the case. And we have a strong case. And that's how it is with the entire Libertarian Party platform. I came to this party over 15 years ago, and it's been my delight to work hard all that time, and have success and prove that it can be done. Now, everybody who's a candidate, puts themselves out on the line. And my experience in my races in Georgia, once again, that have gotten over 1.8 million votes for the Libertarian Party, it's learning how to do a lot with very little, but almost no support, from the national party and sometimes even from the state party. We have to know how to get it done. And one way to do that is, having a strong message and then being able to identify and reach out, to a broad array of people. My support comes from, all sections and caucuses of the party. My experience in doing debates on stage and as a candidate that the LP can trust. They don't have to worry about me handling myself if they gave me the nomination. And I'm very proud of that, and what I've done. So, for some of you that haven't, seen me, Monds2020.com, I have, videos going back, to my governor's race in 2010. So there is information out there. And, in this process with the nomination, it just goes to a higher level. And I feel confident in having the other support of the other candidates as well.
Okay. All right. And Judge Gray, last question is for you. Someone say something? Oh, okay. I didn't hear him.
Yes, I have my card up. I'd like to take my extension to answer that question, if that's all right, for 2 minutes. Excellent. And also to finish the point earlier about consent and what we're talking about with libertarian economic justice. It's one thing to say taxation is theft, and I think most of us here would agree on that, but you have to have a realistic plan for taking back what has been stolen. If you're just pointing out that there's an unequal distribution of wealth and power, and you're not willing to actually say we are going to take back what has been stolen from us, the American people can smell through that crap. And this consent issue, what all these other candidates are suggesting is that they are going to force the majority of the American public's choice of president on the rest of the country without their consent. Localization solves this, but more importantly to this question that Mr. Monds got, some issues that I'm passionate about. We need to be the anti-war party and challenge militarism at its core. We can unite the American people against the pro-war duopoly if we unabashedly own this anti-war message and not give any ground to the warfare state, to the military-industrial complex that led me to see my buddies die for lies in the sand in Iraq. We cannot let that continue. Veteran suicides. If you're running for president and you don't have a serious solution to the problem of veteran suicides, you should not be taken seriously. End the drug war. Give us the freedom to medicate with experimental treatments for PTSD like psilocybin, MDMA. Give us the VA. Privatize it. Give every veteran in America one ownership voting share. I guarantee you won't have the problem of veteran suicides. As I mentioned with this platform, we are giving the opportunity for every single native tribe in this country to claim their sovereignty, to claim land violated in treaties. This is an embarrassment that has gone on far too long. And anybody who's not addressing this is saying that they're consenting to the existing system. No, we cannot allow these national embarrassments to continue. But most importantly, family law. 1/3 of children in this country grow up without their biological dad in broken homes, as like myself as a child of divorce, or have had their lives ruined or their families torn apart by family law crises, by CPS, all these things. Localization solves all of these problems.
Thank you, Mr. Kokesh. Again, the last individual question for the evening is for Judge Gray. A topic that is rarely discussed by libertarians before the nomination occurs, but will be at issue for the general election, is climate change. Many on the left want mandatory behavior changes and a Green New Deal. many on the right deny that there's any real concern and mock any effort to promote responsibility. What are your beliefs on climate change, and how do you reconcile those beliefs with libertarian principles?
Of course, well, completely, thank you, Whitney. They're completely consistent with libertarian principles. You know, ask your question, who does a better job almost everything? A private foundation, private people, or the government? And the answer to that is really straightforward. In fact, again, to my podcast, All Rise, the Libertarian Way with Judge Jim Gray, numbers of times we have had people interviewed. The Nature Conservancy, they're talking about the fisheries, they're talking about husbanding our economy and excuse me, our environment. I've had people on explaining, as a professor at the University of California, Santa Barbara, how the private sector, the private free enterprise system will take care of things like that. It's just a question of lack of education, people thinking wrongly because they're fed by the government that, oh, just because you're a corporation doesn't mean you want to pollute the society. Well, no, it isn't. But by the way, if you pollute my well, if you pollute my home, I can bring a lawsuit against you. We need to get away from class actions so much because the attorneys end up getting that money. No, we need the victims to be able to bring the lawsuit against the polluter. That will restore things. Now, it's a little hard. If you're upstream and you pollute my ground downstream, that's a lawsuit, rightfully so. It's a little bit harder, of course, if it's the air pollution, but the private enterprise system takes care of these things. It's just that people don't recognize it, and we need to get that word out. Now, maybe the government could have a view, for example, of putting a bounty on, we have this trash garbage in the Northern Pacific. Maybe they could put a bounty on, okay, we'll pay you X dollars for every ton of plastic that you take out of here. That's something I think the government should do internationally. But otherwise, libertarianism really does work, and people need to understand that. It's just a question of education. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that ends our question time. We're going to move into closing statements in which each candidate will be given 3 minutes to give any final remarks. I want to remind the delegates for Libertarian Party of Texas, of course, that you should expect an email to come with a straw poll in it soon, so that you can indicate to us who you believe did the best in tonight's debate. So thank you all for tuning in tonight. And now for our closing statements, we're going to start with Vermin Supreme. 3 minutes.
Thank you. If you are unfamiliar with the bulk of my work and my long and storied career, please check out the documentary, Who is Vermin Supreme? It's available on Vimeo. I'd just like to thank you all for allowing me to be here this evening and make my presentation and make my case. I think it's very noteworthy to note that kids are naturally anti-authoritarian. Kids are naturally nonconformist. They look around and they wonder why things are the way they are. And the kids, they do want to change the world. And that is something that libertarians and kids and myself all have in common. In some weird twist of fate, I have found myself as the voice of a new generation. It's certainly not mine, but it is. And I've been using my platform to spread the word of mutual aid and voluntarism and charity and love and empathy and liberty. And indeed, these are the only things that are getting us through this current crisis. It has always been my understanding as an anarchist that to disengage from the state will require us to take a greater responsibility and help build up the structures that the government purports to be delivering. It is people helping people. It is neighbors helping neighbors. It is building stronger families. It is building stronger communities. And all of these things naturally equate the need for less government. Thank you again. Vermin Supreme 2020.com, disruptthevote.com, and inonthejoke.net. Hashtag inonthejoke. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Thank you. Judge Gray, your closing remarks, 3 minutes.
Indeed, and thank you. Thank you, Whitney. Thank you, Tim. Thanks to the Libertarian Party of Texas. It's been nicely run, and it's nice to be with you. Judge Jim Gray and Larry Sharp will be the unifying candidates in the Libertarian Party. In fact, then once we win the nomination, we will be the unifying candidates for the United States of America. People just will crave, will really appreciate, will respond to who we are, what we talk about, and what we do. We believe in libertarian principles. We will show them, we will inspire them that libertarian principles will help you too, your children, etc. By the way, before I leave Ray Sharp, I want to say that I neglected to say that Larry Sharp has also received a top secret clearance when he was in the Marine Corps. But moving along, I learned in Peace Corps training, people will not change their attitude, change their actions without what we called a felt need. That is, they have to feel that this will help them from within. And libertarian principles will. We need to get that word out. We can't do it by scaring people, but we can by inspiring people. Ray Sharp will actually bring a different in the culture, the United States of America. They will make and see that libertarianism is accessible. Oh, that affects me too. You know, I'm elderly, I am sick. Think of a time in which the federal government or any government has gotten involved in the economy, in the free enterprise system, when the prices have not gone up and the quality of goods and services has not gone down. That's what we have seen with regard to healthcare, with education. We explain these things, they are natural constituents, they will gravitate to it. So, you know, we want to be serious, we don't want to scare people. And by the way, if we do say we're going to disband the military and get rid of these various agencies, we're going to truly harm our down ballot candidates. No, we want to, that's the base for our movement. We want to help the down ballot candidates and not scare away the voters. So we understand that I have had a problem, that I made a mistake on a recent podcast where I said I immediately jumped to the second part of a question regarding jury nullification, and I neglected to say the first, which is I've always felt jury nullification is a buttress against convicting and over prosecution. It's something important. The jury finds someone not guilty for whatever reason, facts, law, whatever, it's over, no appeal, it's done. But there's a consequence to that as well, that if you're going to have the judge instruct the jury about that the laws don't matter, that's not a good idea. So let's just understand that judges should not instruct that. And by the way, and then they went on to a First Amendment issue. I'm not going to arrest people for expressing their rights. I will, though, if they block justice. So look, please, we are serious candidates. We will be unifying candidates. Go to graysharp2020.com. and we will, in fact, do you proud, I promise you.
Thank you. John Monds, your closing remarks, 3 minutes.
Thank you, LPTexas. Whitney, you've done an excellent job.
Thank you.
And to my fellow libertarians, you know, what I offer you is hopefully what you see as the total package. You know, you have a candidate who has been a longtime libertarian. You can check that box. A candidate that has had success in its previous races. You can check that box. A candidate that knows the platform, knows how to discuss issues. A candidate that's been on televised debates, radio. A candidate that appeals to various groups within and without the party, whether it's the various, caucuses. I seem to have pretty broad support, whether you're a radical, which I don't know why that term is used for the radical caucus, whether you're pragmatic, whether you're in the Mises caucus, or even if you're in the Waffle House caucus. I have an appeal, that's broad-based right now. And I live the life. I talked earlier about, going to a jury trial for a traffic, citation. But this week, I'm involved in a federal lawsuit in the state of Georgia for ballot access for our U.S. House candidates who have not been able to get on the ballot in the state of Georgia since the 40s when they tried to keep communists, off the ballot. But that's the type of libertarian I am. I'm an activist. I'm a candidate. I've held leadership positions on the XCOMs of the state of Georgia, local affiliates. I go out and speak to everybody I can about the LP. But my promise to you is this: if nominated, I will go to every state that wants me, because I know that's what's important. It's not necessarily on the national level, but it's on the state level where the work gets done. And I'm committed to do that. As a stay-at-home dad, I have the time to do that. And that's my commitment to you. What I'd like to ask for is your support. Tokens should be going out today, and they need to be handed in within the next 24 hours to qualify for the national debate on Thursday. I want your support. I want to be able to get in that debate and hopefully become your nominee, because I realize how important the success of this party is to this country. Just think of it. Freedom today is a radical ideal. So we can't be afraid, and I know Texas isn't afraid to talk about freedom. So we have to be clear to the American voters, whether they see our campaigns or not, that we at least present it in the way that they understand we are not the other parties. We are libertarians, and we want to not only free ourselves, but we want to free everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Munn. Joe Jorgensen, 3 minutes for your closing remarks.
First of all, thank you, Texas, for having me. The first Libertarian Party meeting I ever went to was the Dallas County Libertarian Party meeting after hearing Honey Lanham on the radio. So it's nice to come full circle. So tonight, as you listen to the candidates, some of you may have liked Jim Gray's approach, where he talks about how we need to practically reach the American people. And I completely agree. I don't think that's enough, though. You've also heard Jacob Hornberger talking about we need to stick to our principles. I agree with that, too, completely. But that's not enough. We need to do both. We hear about people talking about unifying the party, but they really don't show a lot of evidence for it. I have evidence. I'm taking the best of both sides. In fact, I'm very honored and proud to announce that I received the endorsement from the Pragmatic Caucus. Also, I scored a B rating from the Radical Caucus. And there are some other candidates on the stage tonight who scored below that. So I'm taking the best of both worlds to take to the American people. So without sacrificing our platform, I would show American voters that without an income tax, each American would save on average about $12,000 to $14,000. They could buy a new car every couple of years. They could take their family on a nice vacation, and they could replace that about to die furnace before they go to sleep at night and not worry about being woken up cold in the middle of the night. I would explain how the drug war helps them. In addition to the benefits I've already listed, I'd also like to say that courts and jails would focus on the real bad guys. Illness and death from tainted drugs would plummet. People with drug problems would be able to easier seek help, so we would have fewer people out there who were addicted. Also, when looking at healthcare, we would dramatically lower the costs. We've got evidence, we've got case studies showing that with a different system, with a free market system, healthcare costs would be 75% lower than what they are now. That's a substantial reduction. With my Bring the Troops Home, my platform is turn America into one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. So this would help end the pretext for massive government overspending and high taxes. We would take reasons for people of foreign countries to hate Americans away. We would take away their reason to seek revenge. It would reduce the threat of terrorism and make our streets safer. Under the environment, under a free market system, we would have a cleaner environment. We would have cleaner waterways, cleaner streets, and a better life to live. So if you like my campaign, please visit my website. I'm at joj2020.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacob Hornberger, last 3 minutes for your closing remarks, please.
Thank you, Whitney, and thank you to the Texas LP for a fantastically run debate. This is obviously one of our best. I also want to say to all my opponents in this race, it's been a real honor and a pleasure to be participating in this debate with y'all, as well as this whole campaign. We're all fighting for the same thing, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be with y'all. Now, you know, when America got founded, there were some bad founding principles. We know that, slavery and so forth, but there were some good founding principles. Americans could keep everything they earned, 100%, and decide for themselves what to do with it. No Social Security, no Medicare, no Medicaid, no welfare state. No warfare state. If you had told Americans after the Constitutional Convention that the Constitution was going to bring into existence a welfare state and a national security state, they would have rejected the deal. So what I want to do with this campaign is gets people to reflect on such questions like, do you want to be free? What does it mean to be free? What is the role of government in a free society? Because if we can get them thinking at that profound fundamental level, then we've got a shot to achieve our goal. And that's our goal. Now, as we know, the progressives started introducing socialist ideas at the turn of the 19th century. America had the most prosperous nation in the world, the most charitable nation in the world, all voluntary. It was amazing. And then the socialists come in with their income tax, their Federal Reserve in 1913. Then Roosevelt totally converts America's system to a welfare state. That's the crown jewel, Social Security. And then he nationalizes gold, destroys the finest monetary system. Lyndon Johnson builds on that with this socialist system of Medicare and Medicaid as part of his Great Society. These things, when we talk about the debt today, these programs, we have $150 trillion in these unfunded liabilities. Social Security and Medicare are $50 trillion. So any candidate in this race is a libertarian that says that they're going to keep Social Security and Medicare intact because they're scared of confronting the American people on what freedom is and thinks they're going to do it without an income tax and an IRS, that's impossible. That's $50 trillion. What I'm saying is, let's go to the American people with a bold campaign, a campaign of pure libertarian principles. Take it right to Donald Trump, make it to Joe Biden. Look what you've done with your welfare state way of life. Look what you've done with a CIA that has the power to assassinate Americans, the NSA that has the power to spy on Americans. We strike the root this way. It's the only way to achieve freedom. If we're gonna just go in this campaign and argue with them over which socialist reform plan is the best, then we lose. In order to achieve freedom, which is our goal, we've got to argue with where our strengths are, principles, ideals, sound ideas on liberty. If we do that, we've got a shot at achieving our goal of a genuinely free society.
Thank you, Mr. Hornberger. Dan Berman, your last 3 minutes.
So I think some really important points were brought up here, but I still see this traditional libertarian thinking that we have. And I want to challenge everybody watching to start thinking outside of the libertarian circle. Get your head out of the echo chamber, because a lot of these ideas, they sound wonderful and I love them also. But we have to recognize, if we really want to spread this idea to people outside of the party, to introduce this to new people, we have to stop talking about these regular talking points that nobody are interested in. Even when we talk about healthcare, we talk about how the government's the problem and all these other things. Yes, that's true. But like when Jacob asks, if you go to somebody and do you want to be free? Most people think they're already free. So of course, yeah, I want to be free, but what are you going to do about that? There is no answer to that. But if you ask them, do you want to be financially free? Do you want to be out of debt? Do you want to stop wasting all your money on rent? Then they're interested. And we're talking about people on the left and the right. The people on the right know they're spending a lot of money on all these things that they shouldn't be spending on. They're worried about job security. They're worried about immigration because of job security and how that's going to affect their job security. These are issues that people are really concerned about. And that's why I put together this new American dream, which actually says we're going to fix those problems. We're going to get rid of individual debt. We're going to get people out of debt. We're going to put people back in their own property. If it weren't for property taxes and inheritance taxes and income taxes, everybody would have the money they need to pay off the debts that they have. They'd be living in their own homes with a roof over their head, rent-free and debt-free. The average American buys their first home when they're more than 30 years old. And not even the average, just about every house mortgage is a 30-year mortgage. That means you're paying rent until it's almost time for you to retire. And if there's any money left in your Social Security, any money that's coming from that, you're going to use that Social Security money just to pay the property tax on that property or to pay your rent if you were never able to buy. The FHA, we talk a lot about the healthcare programs and how Medicare has increased the cost of healthcare. I don't hear that many people talking about how the FHA has increased 8-fold the cost of housing. Why do people have to borrow money for 30 years? Before the FHA, people were buying their houses cash, or they would take out a 50% loan and have it paid off in 5 years. Why aren't these libertarian issues? These are issues that mainstream America cares about. This is why the Democrats and the Republicans are winning, because they're giving them false promises of UBIs and all these handouts and incentives and everything else that they're going to get, and all their problems are going to go away. Remember Obamacare? You remember the sales pitch for that? That's what that is. And if we don't address these people's concerns and tell them that we have better solutions, we're never going to escape that loop. If we want to win, we have to escape the loop, and it does work. I've seen it work. I've done it with this campaign. Berman2020.com.
Thank you. And Adam Kokesh, the last 3 minutes for candidates belong to you tonight.
Thank you so much, Whitney, and to the Libertarian Party of Texas, everybody join us and everybody who's made it possible for us to get to this point. I want to take these last few minutes to talk directly to the delegates, especially those in Texas, who I'm asking for your support. I'm asking for your vote to get the nomination of the Libertarian Party. I wouldn't ask this if I didn't think it was the best thing for the party. I am truly afraid that we might nominate a candidate who's going to bore people to death, who's going to take on anti-libertarian positions that we're going to have to apologize for, that are going to stand in our way of growing this movement and actually growing the party and winning converts to a different way of thinking that we represent. I'm afraid that we're going to have a nominee who represents a failed strategy, where we might pander and compromise our principles to win votes and lose in the long run because we lost the opportunity to connect with people with a message that we know motivates and inspires all of us. As a candidate, I think I've proven that I have the best hustle. I've gone to more state conventions than anybody else. I've raised more money than anybody else. And frankly, the idea that this platform is scary is just opposite of the truth. This is a platform that unifies people, that calms people, that assures people that we don't have to be afraid anymore. We don't have to be afraid of authority. We don't have to be afraid of the federal government. And that's a lot scarier than any libertarian could ever be. Now, we have to be realists. We have to look at what works. Which of us as candidates actually can get a message outside the Libertarian Party? And in this race, the only real options here, if you were a realist, have been Justin Amash, Vermin Supreme, and myself. I think I've got the best record of actually waking people up to a different way of thinking. This idea of localization, the reason I'm running on this platform is not just that it's the most popular one. It's polled at over 25%. We could start with a breakout year for the Libertarian just with that. But this addresses issues that people care about. We haven't heard any other candidates in this debate talk about Bitcoin, talk about veteran suicide, Native American rights, or victims of family law, real things that touch people, like the issues that Dan raised in his closing. I got to say, that's great. Yes, connecting with the American people. This is why we have so many great coalitions in our, I can't even name them all: victims of family law, exotic entertainers, gun owners, first responders, stoners, GSM, Christians, felons for Kokesh. And it's because we're talking to issues that actually relate to people, that don't argue with their preferences, that say freedom means you get what you want. When government is localized to the community level, it's transparent, accountable, customized based on your values, your needs. That's what we can give the American people. So please help me give the American people a real choice. Let us not be afraid and go boldly in with policy that represents our values into this race in 2020. Let's give the American people what they want and win for freedom.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the LPTexas presidential debate for the evening. Thank you so much to our candidates who made the time to be here with us. Thank you to everyone who joined us. Thank you to everybody here on location, this whole team that made this happen. And to the LPTexas delegates, please watch your email for a straw poll coming soon. And thank you to the LPTexas Convention Planning Committee for allowing me to be here. And thank you to Tim Martinez, our host, for keeping me straight today. So thank you, Tim.
Hey, Whitney, thank you. I think you did a phenomenal job. I think everybody tuning in would agree with me. Well, folks, that concludes the evening. Delegates, we did our part. These were the candidates you wanted to hear from, LPTexas. Delegates, we provided the forum for you. Now it's your job. It's going to be up to you to decide who you want to represent you. Their campaigns are still running. You can reach out to the candidates. Their websites were provided. If you'd like to reach out and ask them questions, I'm sure they would love to hear from you. Well, that's it for the evening. Don't forget, we will see you in November at the ballot box. Get out there, represent the Libertarian Party. Check in at LPTexas.org to donate to the party and make sure that those down ticket candidates that were talked about tonight right here in Texas receive the support from their local parties. And right here in Texas, the LPTexas.org is right there for you to check in with us, donate to us, and make sure that your voice is heard out there. Well, that's it. I want to wish you a good night. Thank you to our candidates who stayed with us all the way to the end. Thank you for those of you viewing right now live and those of you who will view later. Godspeed, and may the light of liberty always light your path. I'm Tim Martinez with LP Texas. Good night.
Good night. Thank
Night.
you.
Night.
Peace and love, y'all.
Night, guys.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Whitney.
Time for the after party, right?
All right, this is where everybody